I'm going to talk a bit about my brushstroking technique for my watercolor workflow in Procreate today. The first thing I'll note is that I'm doing this not exactly how I would normally work, in that I don't talk as I'm working, so this may be a bit stumbly. And I've also turned on the brush cursor for the on the preferences, so you can see how much pressure I'm applying on my brush strokes. First thing I'm going to do is create a new document. So I'll close out Procreate, tap on my workflow, and copy my base document into Procreate. That will save a copy in the gallery. So I've got a document open, so I need to close that in order to see it. And go ahead and open the new document up now. About 80% of the strokes I'm going to make are made up of the heavy start solid brush for sort of detail work. It's quite a versatile brush, I suppose. So you can do anything from detail to nice gestural lines. New Year's Eve heavy start area is good for laying in quite big areas, basically. I'm going to start with the heavy start solid though. So basically, a harder pressure will create a bigger brush stroke, but it will be less pigment. A lighter brush stroke, such as literally just dragging the pencil across the screen with only the pencil's weight as pressure, will be very thin. If I start, so you can see I'm just varying the pressure. And really being conscious of how much pressure and controlling that. I'll almost always switch between the brush and the blender straight after a brush stroke, so then I'll go in any areas I want to sort of blur, like these sort of comey bits, just really lightly. Like I'm only using the weight of the pencil, and you can see this is really sensitive compared to the brush. If I do the same sort of movement with the brush, it's hardly varying in size. It's quite I guess what you call a ramp up and down, whereas the blender is really sensitive compared. So you can just sort of go in and so what I did there is, the reason I undid it is because I really liked the way it came out halfway through the stroke. If you, as you use this brush, you'll get a lot of that. You need to stop right before you think you have finished. Just really lightly. That looks a bit patchy to me. I'm gonna take in. It's very difficult to actually show what I'm talking about before I do it. So I'm gonna just select I'm gonna select a pencil as no. Gonna no. let's just an ink pen will be good, so I can show you what the area I'm talking about. So the next thing I'm going to do right here is take this light. No, I didn't actually select the brush. That's better. I'm going to take this light area right here, and I'm going to pull it into this area right here, and we'll try and make a nice watery pattern. So I'll undo those last two strokes. I'm gonna switch back to my blender. So I'm literally, wherever I place the blender, so I'm gonna aim for this light stroke that I circled earlier. Wherever I place it is what's gonna sort of pull through. So if I just put the weight of the pencil on, I'm resting my palm, not my palm, sorry, my little finger to steady the pencil. If I just literally pull it through, and I don't really vary the pressure, you'll see it just carries on in that shade that we picked up. And I'm doing it quite slowly just to show you, but you can do it slow or you can do it quite steady and fast. And as you sort of vary the pressure, you get these lovely edges right here that look really realistic. I suppose it would help if I switch back to, I accidentally switched to the blender there, to my, switch back to that. So you can do the same with edges where a light and a dark edge come in. So I don't really like this pattern here. This pattern right along the edge of that stroke. I don't really like that. I'd rather it looked like it was bleeding in. So I'll switch back to my blender, and the same thing, I'm just going to go run along the edge. So depending on whether I pick the light or the dark, as I touch down, it will drag that value through to the rest of it. So we'll sort of go on this area here and see what happens. So it's just really turn it into a nice subtle blend, and you get this sort of wrinkled look right here that's been picked up from the paper texture. It's sort of influencing that. So generally what I'll do is all these sort of rough edges of that brush, I'll just really lightly go with them. You can see just how the size varying on the brush is I'm not actually varying the pressure that much at all. So I can pull that color in and pull it just, oops, that's one thing you don't want to do, is go over the edge of your stroke. I could either undo that or erase it. I'm kind of alright with the rest of the stroke, so I'm gonna be lazy and erase the edge of that. I've probably got the wrong brush. So when I'm erasing an edge like that, you probably don't want any of these brushes. Just a sort of fairly solid brush would be better in this case. So I'm not gonna work on this bit too much. We'll, for the sake of brevity, if I pick a nice contrasty orange, let's make sure we got the right brush here. So keep the heavy start solid. This time I'm gonna try and make a nice wide stroke. Let's go this way. So vary the pressure. Nothing particularly interesting going on there, but we'll see if we can work with it. So I'll just do the same with the edges. So I'm literally brushing along with the weight of the pencil. I'm not putting much pressure on at all. So you sort of got in this area here, you'll sort of see a cross between the orange and the blue. It's sort of gone a little bit green. If I then went with the blender and picked that color up, it would influence the surrounding area even more. So I mean, you're getting, you might not be able to see it on the video capture, but you're getting like even like pinks in here, so you can bring those in. Just hardly any pressure at all. So that's looking a bit more interesting. Don't know what it is. I guess we're going for the color swatches rather than a doodle. You can add another color in there if you want, but you only ever really need a couple of colors to get this, to get this effect. As you start to add more, it just will end up being muddy. I was reading yesterday sort of about passes on watercolor, like one pass versus more than one pass, as in how many layers you're doing. And kind of like traditional watercolor, you don't want to do too many layers, or it becomes quite unnatural looking. And I'm even getting a bit of a yucky brown in there now. So I think we'll abandon that. And maybe move on to this brush here. So you get much more sort of a square edge on this. So as I said before, it's good for laying an area. So I'm putting quite a bit of pressure on. That's almost transparent. Now you need to control it to get a nice smooth gradient. And then you can go back with the smudger. And just brush along the edges to kind of blend them in. So that covers about 80% of your brush strokes. So the other 20, if I wanted to sort of as if I'm dripping color in, I would probably, well, there's different size droppers here. I think these are based on Abby's brushes. So what colors? Let's go for this dark color. So I'm really not putting much pressure in. They're quite, it's probably a bit big. Let's try. Try that. So after I've dropped that, I'll go in and blend it so it doesn't look so stamped. There's also this very similarly named brush, which I don't even know where I've come up with the names for half of these, but if I use that brush as a brush rather than a blender, it does these kind of cool effect there. So yeah, regarding the blender, what you don't want to do is just smush it like this. It's much lighter and controlled movements. Pretty much using the weight of the pencil. Now what I'll delete that for one. What I'll go in and do sort of after I've done a piece is take it through the post processing in Affinity Photo. That's sort of covered in other videos, so I won't really go into that. Except to say the base document and how this stands now, it looks a little bit blurry. And once you do the post processing and darken the edges, you'll lose some of the contrast. So you'll want to definitely get a handle on post production, which I'll probably cover in another video. Do a quick let's do a face or something. So if you think in sort of volumes, and I want this side dark and the other side light to give a sort of depth to it. So I'm gonna blend the light side into the dark. And put some blue down. So speed and pressure control are quite important, as well as not overworking. And you can always, if we set the same sort of brush, this is a nice eraser. It's basically the same as the Heavy Start Solid. The only difference is I've used the grain sources as one of the inbuilt Procreate ones. Gives a really nice broken up sort of effect like that. So I really like this area here, so I'll try and leave that. Just really control the pressure again. So hopefully that explains a bit more how to get these sort of strokes in instead of these. Thanks for watching.